through 2 parts, technically a part and a half, in the last time that we were covering Jubilee, and then I got hit with copyright. So technically, I shouldn't be doing this again because Jubilee's gonna claim me on copyright like they always do, but I'm gonna go ahead and give it a shot anyway. Let's see what can happen. This is Socialist versus Capitalist Middle Ground. The first 2 bits were the claim that no one should be a billionaire. They fought over that. And then the claim that economic inequality is the root cause for X amount of issues. And they fought over that because apparently the concept of people being poor and therefore crime happening was just kind of weird to the capitalists. I don't know. I don't know how you get to that point. Then again, I also mentioned that I am familiar with one of the capitalists that is there, Carolyn here, because she was one of the campaign managers for Joe Jorgensen, who was the in the Joe Biden presidency before Joe Biden got elected. Joe Jorgensen was the libertarian candidate, and she was doing all of the footwork for her. Said capitalist, I mean libertarian capitalist, laissez-faire capitalist. They're capitalists in the sense that that's their ideology, but not in the sense that they have enough money to be that.
Capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty than any other system. Can the agreeer step forward?
Okay. If we're going to be honest, I think it's pretty clear capitalism is the best system we've ever seen. I think even today, if you're poor,
we won.
Or no.
No, that's not a we won. So here's the thing. Capitalism can be the system that increases the standard of living for a lot of people, and it can be the system that lifted a lot of people out of poverty. Mostly because capitalism as a system got us to the industrial age that we were in, that made it to where a lot of goods that needed to be manufactured for a lot of people were a lot easier to access. Now, the follow-up to that, though, is that irrespective of that claim, it doesn't mean that it as a system should be the one that we use, period. Like, as an idea, right? You have feudalism. You have a bunch of different feudal lands and no larger monarch at the top. There's a lot of infighting. There's no central anything. People die all the time. But then monarchist wins all of the wars, takes over, and then suddenly you have just a big monarchy with a lot of power in one person's hands, and through that power, the land is safer, the land is better, life is generally better for everybody. You can then make the statement that life has been made better than in any system previous that anybody would have known by the monarch and by the monarchy, and it would be a correct statement. Now, does that mean that monarchy should be the thing that nation uses forever instead of moving into, say, democracy or a republic? No. The bare statement, it is better than what we had before, is just in and of itself a statement you can go, okay, and? You notice Jubilee doesn't ever bring on people who could solidly represent left-leaning values while they get right-wing personalities often. I mean, they bring people who can solidly do the left-wing thing. They brought Dean Withers on before, and he's known for being good at articulating that stuff. They've brought on not Sam Harris. What am I thinking of? Why am I blanking on the... Hold on. Sam Cedar. They've brought on Sam Cedar. They've brought on Mehdi Hassan. They brought on a lot of people that do represent left-wing stuff as well. The problem with Jubilee is not that they bring people who are good or bad at representing their side. The problem with Jubilee is that it's political popcorn. You get people who watch Jubilee and they believe that that is them interfacing with politics. You get people who watch me or Hassan or Destiny or Vosh and they think that that is them interfacing with politics, when no, all of us are providing at some form or level politics as entertainment. I know for me, it's in the hopes of energizing people to go out and do shit so that one day I can stop fucking talking about politics. I've mentioned this on stream with Rhino, but I'll let you guys know right now, I don't like talking about politics. I don't like having to research it all the time. It is not a fixation of mine and never has been, but I feel like I don't have a choice, and therefore here I am, and therefore I talk about it. And I feel like I would like to be in a world where that is not a choice that I ever feel like I need to make. Trace says, if these will get taken down on YouTube, could you post them on Twitch? Wait, Trace, I didn't say it's getting taken down. They take down my monetization. I'm clicking the wrong
I think it's
thing.
the best system we've seen so far. And if you look today, I mean, you're better off being poor today than even the Queen of England was 150 years ago. But I think the problem with capitalism is that it takes a lot. Capitalism and financialization come at the same time. And so with financialization, you turn everything into an asset. Things like housing go from being a social right to an asset. And so you reach a certain point. I mean, theoretically, if we believe in infinite economic growth, we're going to eventually get to a point where everybody has as much money as they need for everything and everybody can enjoy the luxuries. And so therefore you should switch to a system where everybody collectively owns things together and it will be more ideal. And I think if you look democratically,
looking at capitalism as a step towards, like, that's capitalism as a step towards communism, it sounds like. Where, like, capitalism has produced so much that we can have abundance, so now we should move to a system that allows that abundance to be spread around instead of consolidated. I don't hate that, but then again, now we're just at Vosh's super capitalism.
the institutions that people support the most are socialists. Like if you think about like a police station or fire department, stuff like healthcare, those are all like socialist oriented goods. And those are the kind of things that we want to eventually get to. The whole point is that you go through a transition in society and capitalism eventually develops into socialism. So
I'll make an example. My mother comes from Soviet Ukraine. Okay, so she tells me stories that my grandma, she's from Turkmenistan, my mom's from Ukraine.
Okay, is this going to be another one of those, like, did you know that in a country that did not have capitalism, things were bad, therefore capitalism good? That's not a good point, but let's see what he actually does. Let's see what he actually says.
They all lived basically in the same house, a government given housing, right? And she kind of talked about the horrors of kind of having this distribution of wealth, all these kind of things, but eventually when the Soviet Union fell, right, she came to America. She sought a better life. At that point in time, she was getting about an average like yearly stipend of 400 rubles, which is around, back then it was like $200, $300. So she came here with nothing. She spoke no English, no money, and she came with a disabled grandma. So she had to figure things out on her own, right? And the only reason why she was able to is because now that she has no restrictions, she has no shackles. She was able to grow. You know, she went from being a non-English speaking Ukrainian.
Okay, so you went from an authoritarian dictatorship with a fully planned economy to a more laissez-faire system under United States capitalism. Yeah, the authoritarian dictatorship sucks. Cool. That is not a point in favor of capitalism as the best system in the world. It's just in favor of it being better than what Soviet Russia had.
Then worked for the USPS. Then she got into nursing school. Then became a dental assistant, and now she does that to this day.
Wow.
And simply coming out of a society that kind of has a roof over her head where she couldn't grow. She was stuck in one point. She supports my family, me, my dad, but also at the same time supports my grandma, who thank God is still with us. And it's only due to capitalism because she was able to grow beyond what she was able to before, basically.
So, funnily enough, that is a point in favor of capitalism. I can agree, but that means that your problem is with a dictatorial planned economy more than anything. That's not what socialism is, though. I feel like maybe none of these people actually can define socialism, because, like, guy over there, even in favor of socialism, did the thing where he went, by the way, healthcare is socialism. No, because in the capitalist model, they're selling healthcare as a good. Let us continue.
Everyone comes down to principles, but I would unequivocally say that nothing that requires the labor of another person is a right, not to diminish what happened earlier.
Nothing that requires the labor of another person is a right. So you're saying that if I live in the United States and I spend money on... Okay, so here's the thing. If I spend money on a thing, do I not deserve the thing I spent the money on? I would argue that in a capitalist society, that is true. Now, if I spend money on healthcare, do I deserve to get the healthcare? Well, yes. Duh. Okay, so if healthcare is included as a thing that my taxes pay for, am I not buying healthcare through taxes? Yes, I am. So, do I not have a right to that thing that I bought? I feel like the principles for like laissez-faire, libertarian capitalism shit, it never accounts for the fact that nobody, not one person, is saying that we deserve healthcare merely by existing. We are wanting to pay for it. Now, I would argue that merely by existing, you should have access to healthcare because somebody is paying for it. That labor is still being paid for. It should be paid for via taxes. Now, would that mean that we have to pay more in taxes? Sure, why not? If you have to pay more in taxes, but you get perfect healthcare, who cares?
We're in this country, because I know these words can be trigger words, and I get it, but it's a form of slavery. When you are required...
It's not a form of slavery to get access to a thing that you have a right to because you bought it. For instance, do you have a right to being protected by the police? If you don't have a right to being protected by the police, then why the fuck do we have the police in the first place? What is the point to that? If the U.S. military, which all of our collective tax dollars pay for, if the United States military is not a thing that we have a right to be protected by as U.S. citizens, then why the fuck do we have it? We have a right to it because it is paid for by us collectively, not individually. That's the delineating factor between the capitalist and the socialist is the individual versus the group. All of the same systems the capitalist likes all exist under socialism. The difference is how they are paid for and how they are organized, but they are all still there. You still have your law enforcement, you still have your military, you still have your video game production companies, but instead of them being owned by a guy at the top, suddenly they are owned democratically. Let me give you a fucking example right now. Microsoft. The new lady who's in charge of Microsoft. When she got in charge of Microsoft, a bunch of people started asking what her credentials were as a gamer, instead of actually looking at what her history was as a CEO. And while there is a level of misogyny that can be blamed for some of that, when you look at her history as a CEO, she's not a person that I want in charge of fucking Microsoft, especially not their games division. But you only get those kinds of corporate shufflings when it's not the people at the bottom that are making the decisions about who's going to lead them. That is something that is unique to capitalism, where the decisions at the top always remain at the top and they trickle down and then everybody else has to fucking deal with it. Whereas under socialism, you have things from the bottom up. All the same systems are there, though. Everything's there. So when you're just like, no, it's actually slavery, really. No, it's not. It's the same fucking system. We pay taxes for things in capitalism. And then we get those things. It's just a reorganization of how those things are paid for. It's still taxes and where that money goes when you're talking about socialism.
To use your body and your labor to provide something for somebody else, you no longer own yourself. And for me, that's a non-negotiable.
Have you considered you could leave the job? Like, is it slavery to do your job? Like, this is the reason I cannot take libertarians seriously. I can't. Because when they say that being told to do your job when you are at a job is slavery, I'm confused as hell. I can't understand it. It feels like a 3-year-old's understanding of how an economy works. When you are at a job, you do the job you are paid to do. And if you are paid via tax dollars, or you are paid via insurance dollars, or you are paid up front because somebody just happens to be loaded with a butt fuck ton of cash, it doesn't matter. In all of those scenarios, you are getting paid to do your job. It's not slavery to get paid to do your fucking job. Jesus.
Idealistic society where my effort can be forcefully taken from me against my will to provide for someone else. Now, I'm a very generous person. I don't mind giving to other people, but you try to take it from me, and all of a sudden it's like, no, ma'am, not today, Satan, no. So I think there is that fundamental.
Like, I'm just curious here. How do you plan on running a government with no taxation? With no money going into the government whatsoever? How do you plan on running that thing? And if you don't have that thing, what bulwark do you have from the Andrew Ryan who wants to make their own fucking corporate town?
Disconnect there. So you talked about a right to housing. Your right is to pursue housing. I can't stop you and another willing participant from arranging for housing, but I don't have to give you one, and I don't have to do a thing to get you one.
Ma'am, you would not be giving somebody one. It would be the job of the government to do so, and the job of the government would be funded by tax dollars. Therefore, workers and laborers are being paid to do the job. They are being paid to make the stuff. And then we are paying taxes in order to continue that going forward. Social Security. Can we talk about Social Security for a second? I think Social Security is a wonderful system. I think it's broken to shit, and I think it needs to be inflated with a lot more dollars for our aging residents of the United States, but I think Social Security is a wonderful system. The idea that once you hit a certain age, you have contributed to society enough that you are allowed to receive a benefit from society. That's a wonderful system. Did you know that that's no fucking different than the government providing housing? That's no different. If you are a person who is participating in society and you have a house over your head, you can participate more in society. You can do more with society. Yeah, there's going to be a handful of people who don't do well with it. There's going to be a handful of people who turn out to be monsters, but you can't control for that. People are more productive when they have a roof over their head. People are more productive when they are healthy. So why would we not, even as a capitalist society, why would we not invest in the health and well-being of the people who live in the United States? Why would we not do that? Why is that not a thing we do specifically? I want socialism. I want the organization structure where it is more top-down leadership getting thrown out for bottom-up leadership, where people are able to elect their leaders from within them, as opposed to having them mandated from on high because somebody had more dollars than you. I want that system. But if I have to be stuck in capitalism, I'm perfectly okay advocating for these, quote, socialist things from within a capitalist framework. We can get those things. We have the systems for it.
Now, if I know you and I like you, I'll want to help you out.
I was going to say, I think analytically, if we look at what socialism really is, it's really just a collective ownership of all goods. And I think, so if we...
It's not. It's not. No, stop. Fucking hell. No. Socialism is not the collective ownership of all goods. Who fucking taught you that? Who? Socialism is when the proletariat, aka the workers, own the means of production. You don't have collective ownership over all goods. You have people as groups owning the fucking factories. They don't own the toothbrushes. You don't have collective ownership over the fucking toothbrushes. Those are every single bit of Marxist literature that talks about what a piece of private property is. Will note that there is a delineation between private property and personal property. Public ownership of all goods is not fucking socialism. I would argue that that's a system that you barely can even establish in the first place within our current frameworks. We can get to socialism within our current frameworks. Step one is unionizing. You get all the fucking places unionized. Now they have fighting power against people who own capital. And then afterwards, you have the ability to negotiate with those unions and the people who own capital. And from the negotiation table, you can move into a system where collective bargaining turns into collective ownership. But again, that's collective ownership of the factories. That's collective ownership of the workplace. That's what socialism is. It is not collective ownership of all goods. Again, who the fuck told you that? When did that come up?
Look at housing, right? The biggest issues that we have with housing is that certain types of housing is allowed, not. There's regulation, not. And I think the way that we fix those is we have to have the state. The state has to exist. The state has to moderate things. And ideally, you want everybody to work together and to vote and to be on the same page.
Voting is 50 people telling the other 49 what to do.
Yeah, okay. Let's go back to the housing thing. Your concept.
Voting is... Do you not believe in voting? Ma'am, do you unironically advocate for the election of an individual while not believing in fucking voting? Do you think that everybody's an island? What system do you want where people are not voting? Do you have everybody individually completely atomized from one another? That doesn't fucking work. You're going to get collectives that spark up, and those collectives that spark up are going to have the power, are going to have the conversation every single time. Who gets the power within that collective? And then as that grows and as that balloons, you get the concept of a state. You get the concept of the government within that state. You get all of those concepts coming out every single time when you jam enough people together. You're gonna have people that go, well, we need to have a way to run things. We need to have a way to make sure that things can be ran at all.
concept of the state needing to grow infinitely to maintain, sure, you can possibly assume that. But let's look at the issue of housing, where this is tantamount the exact opposite case. As the state has grown, as we have grown more and more regulations, we have stunted our ability to build. So let's look at California. I love the state, it's my home state, love it to the ground, but we have kneecapped our ability to grow. Let's look at that train we built. Because of our size of our state and because of the amount of regulations we put in place, environmental, all good and well, but when you overdo it, which we make it so that we have a sliver mile of a high-speed rail in the middle of Merced going to nowhere, which none of us really want that. We all want a high-speed rail, that'd be super cool, but because of our heavy regulation, we just kind of slapped a portion of it down there, uncompleted. This also falls down.
Are you sure that that was because of regulation, or is it because of lack of funding, or like, I feel like I'm talking about an issue that I do not understand, to be fair. Is California not my home state? Railway, not my hyperfixation, not my kind of autism. Drew Dave says, or because Elon Musk fucked it up. Yeah, like, I'm just curious, is it overregulation, or is there something else that butted in there? People who know more about high-speed rail in California, let me know in the comment section below, because I feel like that may have been one of those things where somebody did zero research and just parroted that. That's what that seems like to me. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm willing to be wrong, but man, this does not seem like the case. I'm not saying that overregulation is good. Hell, I've been dealing with a situation where we need to upgrade my electrical panel. And one of the things that is needed for me to upgrade my electrical panel is for me to have a smoke detector in every single room in the fucking house. Now, that sounds absolutely asinine to me, especially when the electric company wants to charge $1,000 to install the smoke detectors. I'm not saying that regulations are all well and good. There are times and places where they are just fucking weird as shit, and they don't need to be there. Or like when I was building the stairs for Game Apologist up in Iowa, when I was rebuilding his stairs, I had to look at the regulations for the building codes for the stairs to make sure that I got them done for him in a way that wouldn't be fucked. And one of the building codes in there was that you needed to be able to take a sphere and slit it between the different straight, I didn't remember what the posts. You need to be able to slit a sphere between the posts. And Dorita Dave says, 4-inch gap, you're funny. Because it turns out where he lived in Iowa had a different inch gap than other areas in Iowa. Every place in fucking Iowa had a different measurement for that gap. And so when I was given the information from my friend Biminem, oh, it's so a baby wouldn't get their head stuck. My response was, do you think that everybody in Iowa has a different fucking shaped head? Do they all have different fucking shapes based on where they are born in Iowa? What the balls? That I recognize that could be the reason why that is there, why that measurement is there. But when the measurement is different, then you have to make the secondary argument that the fucking human-sized cranium changes shape every time based on being located 10 miles out of a fucking city in Iowa. That doesn't make any goddamn sense to me. There are regulations that are just fucking arbitrary and asinine. My argument is not that they don't exist. But I refuse to believe that is the only reason you didn't get fucking rail.
To our housing. Because of how much regulation we have, there's so much red tape to get anything built, we don't get anything built. So we don't have sufficient housing.
I mean, kind of to piggyback off what he's saying, it's artificial scarcity. In essence, it's the government who's imposing these problems. You know, we see zoning as a problem. They don't allow us to make duplexes in certain areas, and it costs tens of thousands of dollars just to create a house. And I think with that, if the government...
Do you know why you can't have duplexes in certain areas? Do you know why zoning laws exist? Oftentimes, regulations are written in blood. Again, I'm not saying all regulations are good, all regulations are great. I'm fucking not. But anybody who is a builder can tell you that regulations are written in blood. They exist because somewhere down the line, somebody had some bad shit happen and a regulation was put in place to try to make sure that bad shit didn't happen again. Now, again, sometimes that turns out to not be a very good regulation. We sometimes overregulate. We sometimes fuck up. But I cannot stand the people who are just like, actually, the rules shouldn't exist.
It's creating this artificial scarcity to even develop new housing or make it more affordable, aka build more and supply more. Why would a big
artificial scarcity of housing? My guy, you understand that there are more houses than there are unhomed people. There are more empty houses in the United States than there are people who do not have houses. Why do you think that is, sir? What system do you think allows that to happen, sir?
Your government do better if the small government's already doing worse?
How did we get into what is ANCAP?
Anarcho-capitalist.
Oh.
Yeah, I only disagree.
The fucking dude. Actually, what is ANCAP? Actually, is the larger dude a fucking ANCAP? Okay, I don't want to make it. Look, I'm a larger dude. I don't want to do the thing where I go, man, it's weird. But there is the first time ever that I saw somebody advocate for them being an anarcho-capitalist, they looked like the kind of person that the stereotype when you make fun of a Redditor, the like fedora tipping r/atheist Redditor that is overweight, that stereotype. The first video I ever watched on the internet that told me what an ANCAP was by somebody that looked exactly like that fucking stereotype. And I feel like maybe the stereotype came from that specifically, but neither here nor there. There is a reason that my Reddit profile picture is the overweight soy jack, where they're just saying, actually. There's a reason that's my Reddit picture for me, because if I'm on Reddit, then that's what I feel my brain is at. But it just the ANCAP thing and me thinking, well, the only person I think it could be would be him, because I know that it's not Karen. My brain just went down an entire fucking rabbit hole of memories. Or I'm like, oh my god, you don't look exactly like him, but you have the stocky build. And the stocky build with the fedora hat is what I remember from the guy who defined the thing. Weird shit. Absolutely weird shit.
Because, okay, so you're lifted up out of the system, right? But can it be maintained like your now new living environment or situation? Or are you one check away from going back to where you were, which is how I feel we are today? So like, I'm still check to check today. Like, if something happens, I could easily end up back there.
That's not the fact, though, unfortunately.
But I'm giving an example. Thank you, Sebastian.
Wait, hold on. What did he say?
I'm still check to check today. Like, if something happens, I could easily end up back there.
That's not the fact, though, unfortunately.
But I'm giving an example.
What is he saying? Am I missing? Hold on.
Today. So like, I'm still check to check today. Like, if something happens, I could easily end up back there.
That's not the fact, though, unfortunately.
Did he say, but that's not the problem, though?
Which is how I feel we are today. So like, I'm still check to check today. Like, if something happens, I could easily end up back there.
That's not the fact, though, unfortunately.
But I'm giving an example.
I can't tell what he's saying at all.
Thank you, Sebastian, of why I disagreed, and that was where I was going to leave it at, so I don't get too far off topic.
But I guess the response to that would be, what specific alternative would alleviate those concerns except for capitalism?
Right, and that's the thing. I'm an abolitionist, so I think we need to burn all that down. So I don't have the solution, but I just know that I disagreed with that for the reason I stated.
I actually want to point to a couple things I do agree with. I agree that there's artificial scarcity, but it ain't the government that's causing artificial scarcity. It is hoarding. It is ownership by a few. That is, to me, tyranny. You talk about tyranny in libertarian and anarcho-capitalist circles. Tyranny, to me, is that which is imposed by those who have the resources to impose it. And to me, the people who have the resources to impose that kind of authority are the Elon Musks, the Jeff Bezoses, the billionaires who happen to now be also in the government, creating a lack of distinction between private capital and the state.
I agree.
So that we can agree.
No, she's going to agree with that because she's anti-fucking government. She's going to be like, nope, we shouldn't have any government. We shouldn't pay any taxes. What the fuck is a school, by the way?
Ground there, right?
Yes, I think there's a lot of middle ground, actually.
Well, true, but it's the causes. It's the causes that we're talking about. And I agree with what you were saying. So I disagree on the principle that capitalism has brought people out of poverty more than ever. Socialism is an outgrowth from capitalism. Capitalism inherently breeds socialism. So for me, it's like we have to embrace it and understand how it will work, because it's an inevitability.
Where I would push back is when you say that capitalism is a fruition of feudalism. Capitalism is a fruition of human existence and of human nature, whereby...
Show me where in the human nature capitalism is. So, capitalism began as mercantile capitalism, and mercantile capitalism began as a way to make sure that goods could be distributed amongst fucking feudal states. Historically, capitalism does come from feudalism. And when you go into late stage capitalism with not a whole lot of regulation, you go back to feudalism where people have a fuck ton of soft power, and they get their own little areas where they get to make all the fucking rules, like company towns. And company towns are no different than being in a fucking feudal land.
We have incentive to do things. You had an incentive to come on the show, whether it was because you wanted to express your ideas, you wanted to be on TV, you had a reason for coming here, otherwise you wouldn't have come here. No one forced you to do it. So to capitalism, while it is true, capitalism as a theory, as an economic principle is 400 years old, capitalism as an innate human response to life has been around essentially since we've been able to trade and bear our own existence. If we did not live in a capitalist system whereby
Capitalism is not the ability to trade goods, because the ability to trade goods exists in multiple economic systems. Jesus.
we were incentivized to do things, then we would be decentivized. And the problems that you are alluding to, which I would agree with, there is income inequality. Yes, there is to a degree of scarcity. We might disagree on the causes, but we certainly don't disagree that it exists. My response would be, we actually need more capitalism as an...
No, capitalism is specifically the economic and political system where a country's trade and industry are controlled by private interests instead of by public interests. To try to boil all concept of trade to capitalist is asinine. because markets exist in socialism. Markets exist in syndicalism. Markets exist with trade and money and goods and all that shit in other systems that are not strictly capitalist.
Antidote to these problems that you are alleviating. When I start a business, for example, truly the only way my business will ever succeed is if it provides a service to you, if you benefit from it. Because if you don't benefit from it, or if no one benefits from it, then guess what? My business will cease to exist. So
no, incorrect. Incorrect. So, this is a fucking lie that I hear a lot when it comes to people who are super pro-capitalist, and I want to go ahead and try to debunk it right now. You do not have to provide a useful skill or service in capitalism in order to survive or in order to succeed. What you have to do is you have to convince other people that you do. Any of you who have ever been involved in sales know that sales is asking questions. It is asking people what their perceived needs are and then trying to give them a solution that can solve those needs. How long have you been in the market for a pen, mister? As opposed to, would you like to buy a pen today? The reason I say that, you do not have to provide somebody something that somebody needs. They do not need a pen when you sit down to have the conversation with them. But what your job is to convince them that they need a pen, and specifically that your pen would be the best and most convenient and most influential and super good, awesome option that they have access to. A good capitalist does not sell you a good that you need. A good capitalist convinces you that you need a good. Marketing is the job of the good capitalist. Marketing themselves, marketing their good, marketing their thing. So, there's a book I've read, World War Z. There's a moment in that book where a antivirus, a vaccine to the zombie virus is developed. In that book. The book is a series of interviews with people who survived the zombie apocalypse. A vaccine is made to something called like African bird flu or African rabies, because in the early time of the virus, they thought that African rabies was what the zombie virus was. So at one point during the interview, there's a very rich guy who's being interviewed by the main character, and the main character's asking him, so you sold everybody a lie? And he goes, well, no, I sold them peace of mind. I was told to make a vaccine for African rabies, and I did it. Ignore the fact that African rabies was not the actual thing that was killing people, and it's not the actual thing they needed, but they were convinced that's what they needed, so that's what we made. He made millions and millions of dollars in the story of the book, fiction though it may be, because people had been convinced that they needed something that they did not need. And then, of course, they died. Marketing is how you convince somebody that they do not have the ability to live without the thing that you are giving them. You can be lying. So you can have a business that sells people things that they do not need, that fills no niche in whatsoever, because your business can create a niche, artificial though it may be. Once it exists in the psyche of the American, you've created your niche. Nobody needs the thing that you're making, but you made a thneed. And everybody wanted a thneed. And surely, wouldn't you want to have a thneed? For anybody who's seen the Lorax,
capitalism can actually alleviate a lot of the concerns that you are addressing, especially when it comes to housing. I'm a New Yorker. We just elected an actual socialist, Sawara Mamdani. If we truly want to build more housing, something like a rent freeze would kill any incentive, this profit motive that land developers, property owners have who develop property and build land and housing.
I feel that you're equating commerce with capitalism, and though they're not synonymous.
Yeah, that was one of my concerns as well. The ability to simply trade goods between each other is not capitalism. Capitalism is the ability to hoard those goods privately. Mr. Cordo, thank you very much for the follow. You said I have a need for a thneed. Dark Lord Kid says, and also there's only 2 types of rabies, if I remember correctly, and the vaccine for rabies is administered after a bite from a suspected rabies-infected animal. I mean, yes, but yes, that is true, but that detail is not necessary for where the book is concerned, unless you're saying it, because like people took it without being bitten in the book. So I understand what you're saying, though.
Commerce occurs under socialist, not just governments, but the whole system. I think we're equating the idea of people, you mentioned incentives. Incentives can and do still occur under socialist systems. And to me, the idea that that can only occur in a laissez-faire...
This is why you need to define your words. My God, none of these people sat down and defined what socialism was before they had the conversation. But again, it is good for Jubilee that they didn't, because Jubilee makes their money by selling politics as entertainment, politics as popcorn. And when people are talking past each other, that's great entertainment. That's fantastic entertainment. When people actually come together and go, oh, we're advocating for similar things, we just have different words for it because we didn't properly define our words, maybe we could have done that better, that doesn't make for good TV. Fighting, arguing, disagreement, that makes for good TV, and that's what Jubilee sells.
Free market sort of situation, which again, markets also do exist in socialism. Trade and innovation, these are not things that are necessary only to capitalism.
If you're cool with laissez-faire economics and you're cool with free markets and you're cool with the invisible hand, call yourself a socialist, call yourself a communist, a capitalist, I don't care, but that's great. And,
You're Adam Smith's invisible hand of the markets, that thing that doesn't really fucking exist. Okay, sure, why not?
but by that definition, every single Republican is a socialist. Because they would all agree.
No, God, the stupid fucking reductive shit. Republicans do not advocate for unions, let alone advocate for the collective ownership of the businesses to the exclusion of the billionaires and the millionaires and the CEOs and the owners, to the fucking board and shareholders. Republicans advocate for the board and shareholders. They do not advocate for the union workers. They do not advocate for the people who would like to have collective ownership over their business. Define your fucking terms
with those things.
A market does not necessarily mean a free market. It's about what that market is.
Nobody's calling for the abolition of markets. It really has to do with how the markets are
For sure they
arranged.
do. That's literally socialism.
No,
No, it's not.
God fucking damn it, every one of these people is so goddamn stupid. Holy fucking shit. Socialism is not the abolition of markets. What? Okay, so if I have a shoe factory, right? If I got a shoe factory and I own the shoe factory, and then the shoe factory across from me is a co-op, collective ownership of the shoe factory, and we are both in the market. Guess what? We are both in the market. We both exist in the market. Now, under socialism, I don't get to privately own my shoe factory. My shoe factory is a co-op in general. I get to be part of the shoe factory guild. I get to be I get to be the leadership here, and if the leadership gets changed because the workers decide that I'm not being a good leader, then fuck it, that happens. Under socialism, you have more of those businesses that are operating the same way co-ops do right now, but they are not having to compete with the capitalist markets. They are competing against other co-ops, which, by the way, looks really fucking similar to two capitalists fighting each other, but tends to have less underhanded shit because you're not dealing with a board of directives or a shareholders or any of that shit. Socialism is not the abolition of markets, you goddamn moron. All those markets still exist. It is about how you structure the workplace, how leadership is structured within the workplace. The adage for socialism is, if democracy works so well in our government, then why don't we bring that to the workplace? If you believe socialism is any more or less than that, then neato. But that is not the definition of socialism that I would use, and it's the definition of socialism that I have tried to use for about as long as I've called myself a goddamn socialist. Motherfuck.
It has to do with the collective ownership of the markets, and I think we equate like...
That's not a free market, though. When you call...
Yeah,
we don't have
market.
free
It's a
market.
market.
We don't have free
Okay,
market.
well,
It's definitionally correct.
Well,
Price-wise is not great.
Okay, definitionally some of us, not you, but me, and I don't know if anyone else here. The word free goes with market. It's like saying, well, I've got kosher bacon. No, bacon by its definition is not kosher, and markets by their definition are free. It's not markets otherwise. It's
But what? Do you know that we have like a free market index that shows how free an individual market is, right? Markets are not, by their definition, always free. You can have regulations in a market. Ma'am, are you crazy?
But we can't have free markets, and I think one of the most convincing things to me in sociology is like the idea of what we call the varieties of capitalism. And Holland Saucius like outlined, there's different manifestations of capitalism, and ideally, you can't have a completely free market because you have to have regulation.
Can I quickly add, because I really want to understand this position here. When you talk about these voluntary cooperatives, perhaps inadvertently you are literally describing the composition of an LLC. I mean, you can say that's socialist. I think that's a weak argument, but ultimately that is a fruition of free markets of people coming together to make voluntary agreements. What I'm struggling with your side is, even with your diagnoses of the problems of capitalism, what specific alternative are you looking for? And then can you name 2 countries currently that socialism is in fact working? China?
Okay, can I name the country that it's working in? No, but prior to capitalism existing, could I name the country where capitalism was working in? No. Prior to a democratic republic existing, could I name a country where a democratic republic existed? No. That's a bad fucking argument. It hasn't existed before, therefore it's bad. No fucking dummy. Okay, anyway.
China's one.
You think
And
that
China's not
What is
socialist.
gonna go down
What
well?
is the fastest growing economy in the world?
Actually,
China.
per capita, it's not China at all. In
why
fact,
is
China's stagnating. The reason why they have a large economy is because they have 1.5 billion people.
Well, that's the rest of the
Why is their economy
economies.
growing? We gotta ask why their economy is growing. It's because they're opening themselves up to the free market.
First off, all production is basically there, like virtually all production. Trump wanted to do production here and was not successful, in part because of
China's not socialism either. That's state capitalism. That's top down. Oh, that's okay. So I'm just going to say this right now. There is no difference between China's system and the United States system in terms of like the levers that are being pulled, right? So in the United States, so much of our industry is handled by a tiny handful of oligarchs. How is that any different than the state capitalism that exists in China right now, where all their industry is handled by the Chinese Communist Party, which ultimately all answers to the one fucking guy, Winnie the Pooh? There's not much difference there other than the fact that in one of these, there is more transparency. But there's really not much fucking difference between those things. That's why we point out that China's state capitalist. Now, because China's state capitalist, they are able to induce a little more organization into their system than we do here. And so, sure, their economy grows more, but they're not fucking socialist. I hate everybody on this panel. I hate everybody on this panel. If you guys want a part 3, sure, I might do it, but I'm so I can't. I just can't. Terran Ambassador says, I'm further convinced that Jubilee exists solely to platform nonsense. I don't agree with anybody in this fucking panel. All of them. My God. You think Churchill said it best? What was his quote? His quote was, democracy is the worst political system we've ever come up with, except for all of the other ones. You can say capitalism is the best economic system we've ever come up with, except for all the other ones, and then still say socialism good. Okay, so from the perspective of at least 2 of the people here, where they believe that socialism is a natural outcropping of capitalism, sure, I'm willing to accept that. Where it's like, capitalism makes the Industrial Revolution happen, and then socialism is when that ownership of those things are handed down. Much like in the United States, where we won our Revolutionary War, and then instead of having a king based on the military professionals that won, they handed the leadership off peacefully to the rest of Americans, giving us democracy as we understand it today, with all the problems that it has. Okay? If you want to have the system where like capitalism moves to socialism because via agreements or what have you, all of the multi-billionaires decide that they are handing the reins of control to the people who are like the workers of their factory, then sure, congratulations, you've made a socialism. You've done that. You've moved our economic system to that. If that's how you want to believe it, sure, that's not what China is. And with their particular argument that socialism is an outcropping of capitalism, then it would make sense for capitalism to be a prerequisite for socialism to come out. And if that is the case, then the argument from the right side, where they're saying, can you name 2 countries where it works, is doubly a bullshit argument, because the argument would be like, well, no, I can't name 2 countries where this future system would works right now, because we are trying to get to the point where we can do the experiment.
capital forces has somewhat of a monopoly on production. Whether that's good or not is another question. But I think the idea that we shouldn't question it because it's working for some of the people now is a concession that society can't get better. It's saying Fukuyama was right. History's over. People can easier understand the end of the world, the post-apocalypse, than they can post-capitalism. And that's because there's not that understanding or forward thinking, in my view. And at least looking at China, you can see, sure, I'm not saying that it's a perfect country. I'm not saying that there's not problems with the system itself, but it is a force.
You could at least say what the system is. You could at least point out it's state capitalism. You could at least define what fucking socialism is. Man, God, if you guys want a part 3, then I will gladly do a part 3. It was requested in the comments section of part 1 for me to do a part 2, and now here we are with my brain bleeding all over the fucking floor. Ugh. What's the next part? Corporate monopolies provide something? That can't possibly end poorly. Anyway, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Consider being a patron if you would like to see behind-the-scenes stuff, though I'm not going to lie, most of it lately has been me bitching about trying to get my power upgraded so I can finally have air conditioning. So I'm not going to lie, it's been kind of a shit show over there. But if you want to see that behind the scenes stuff where I repeatedly try to remember that I need to make patron slides for the people who have paid $20 a month to be patrons, and I keep forgetting to do that, yeah, be a patron. I don't think I'm selling it very well. I'm not a good capitalist. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for being here. Check out another video from the channel if you haven't already. And I'm going to go make Magic the Gathering content now. Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Sylvie Snow, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.